there are these digital challenges that other generations didn't have to deal with. So one of them is overload. You could have a lot of information in your job because a lot of us, we're not paid necessarily for our muscle power, it's more our mind power. It's not our brute strength, but it's really this age, it's our brain strength. And knowledge is not only power, it's profit. And I don't mean financial profit, that's obvious, right? The faster you can learn, the faster you can earn in today's economy. But I mean all the treasures of your life, because when you can learn how to learn, you could apply that towards your relationships, towards your wellness, towards your career. And I would say that inside of these companies, whether they're individuals or organizations, the greatest advantage, competitive, sustainable advantage in a world full of fast change is our ability to be able to absorb, to be able to assimilate, to be able to apply new information. And that really comes down to really understanding how our mind works. And so I am obsessed with solving this riddle of how does my brain work so I can work my brain. And not just to recite ivory tower, research, but really how does that affect us on a day-to-day, application, and where it's holding us back from getting our to-dos done, for us finding more of the things that light us up. Because I feel like a lot of people, I see this on social media a lot, they'll complain about being burnt out or they'll complain about being tired. And I don't think necessarily in every case that we're burnt out or tired because we're doing too much, but maybe we're doing too little of the things that really matter, that make us feel alive. And I always talk about the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. Because just like Dr. Stephen Covey, he talks about putting, first things first and beginning with the end in mind. And if you're climbing the ladder of success and you get all the way to the top and you realize it's leaning on the wrong wall, better to know earlier than later. And so beginning with the end in mind is kind of like this idea where you go fast forward all the way to when we're taking our last breaths. And at that time, nobody's opinions or our fears, none of that's going to matter. What's going to matter is how we lived, how we loved, how we laughed, how we learned. And I think people have to come from that place. And nobody has this perfect. And everyone has to find, you and I in our last conversation talked about balance. And I've been reflecting on this thing called balance because we use it a lot. And the words we choose affect how we process and perceive the world. And I was thinking about balance. When I'm thinking about balance, I was thinking like, wow, sometimes it's, balance beam and it's a little bit stressful trying to get everything equal weight, because that's what balance ultimately means, like a balance. I've been using the word harmony a lot more because I feel maybe my goal is not to make everything absolutely equal, the amount of time in my relationship, to the amount of time I spend in the gym, to the amount of time that I'm working on my career. But maybe the goal is like an orchestra. Each instrument, they don't necessarily have equal time, but they come together in a way that creates art, a symphony. And that's how I'm looking at life. So I feel like going behind the scenes at these companies, whether an individual organization, I think the ultimate quest that we're all on is to be able to realize, to reveal our fullest potential. And these companies want to do that too. And you'll find that the majority of a day is either trying to process information or create something, right? Something's coming in, and then creativity or innovation coming out. But that the medium that all that's happening is a supercomputer. And so I go into companies to help them to be able to learn faster, to be able to keep up with the data overwhelm that everyone's struggling with. That's leading to a lot of health challenges. They call it information fatigue syndrome. Higher levels of higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness. I mean, all the factors that are really hindering our state of mind and body. And so that's a big health concern. I help them with also focus, because a lot of companies, we see that our capacity to concentrate is just reducing because of all these digital devices, right? Every time we get a like, a share, a comment, watch a cat video, whatever, we get this dopamine flood, and that's going along our motivation, our learning systems, tracks of our nervous system, and it's keeping us like, we can't maintain attention. So I'm very concerned a little bit with children that are growing up with swipes. Yeah. Everything is swipe here or there, and they're getting, and how does the education system be able to, how do you reconcile my mother became a school teacher. You mentioned that I had learning challenges, and I had a decade and a half of daily 24-hour struggle with studies and put in special classes. But my mother became a special education teacher to try to help me because she didn't know how to be able to support me in that arena. And I think one of the challenges is just we're not taught. And how does teachers? I feel so bad because it's not a teachers are some of the most caring, compassionate individuals, committed individuals. They might not be compensated maybe as they should, depending on where people live in the world. But it's a system issue. The world has changed so much, but our education system hasn't kept up necessarily. And a lot of people feel not prepared. So even at these companies, people feel like they're falling behind. And the biggest line item I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs who watch this, and if they have a team of employees, the biggest line item, for any business is human capital. And if half a day is being spent just processing information 4 or 5 hours a day, you think about all the emails and texts and business plans, just all the content. If you could just cut that in half, like if I could show you how to learn that in half the time, and you could save a couple hours a day, that's transform. What would you use if you had 2 extra hours a day? What would you apply that to? And the great thing is, time is money, if you will. It's wealth. And it's the one thing we can't get back, which is why I'm so enthralled and so appreciative to be able to have this conversation with everyone watching, because I respect everyone watching this, because whether or not they paid for it or not, it's their time and their attention. And we live in this economy of, that's the attention economy that we're in. And so I want to make this, as valuable as anything else. And I really do believe, though, that that there's a big lie out there that knowledge is power. We hear it a lot, and we even say it a lot, but when you think about it, it's not really power. It has the potential to be power, but it only becomes power when we use it. And that really comes down to the questions that we ask on a regular basis. And so I also, when I'm in with these companies, you'll notice that certain cultures, if you think about a company culture as a set or of shared beliefs and behaviors, that some of them, the most innovative ones, are asking different questions than others. In terms of, we talked about the book I mentioned before, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, where a lot of evolution in any industry, fashion, automotive, any kind of technology, usually comes from people outside, because it takes an outsider to look in to ask a different question.
Right.
Like an Elon Musk looking at the automotive, saying, why with today's technology are you not doing it this way?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're kind of encouraging companies to have those questions.
To be able to find, I feel like we have these questions that are dormant, that are unconscious. And so if you could direct that. So for example, I'm obsessed with 3 questions. And we talked about dominant questions in our last conversation, about Will Smith and his dominant question, and your dominant question about bringing more joy to every single moment and bringing more magic. And that directs your focus, your reticular activating system, because at any moment, there's probably 2 billion stimuli we could be paying attention to. So primarily, our brain is a deletion device trying to keep all this information out, because we would go insane with all that novelty. And what do we decide to pay attention to is what we ask questions about. That dictates our focus. And we know our focus determines where our energy goes, how we feel, and what we actually do. And you've had past guests talk about the science of epigenetics, and how our thoughts in the present affect our physiology and gene expression and proteins. And so I believe thoughts are things, and if people truly knew how powerful their mind was, they wouldn't say, think, or feel something they didn't want to be true. And I'll say that again for people who are just dialed into this. If you knew how truly powerful your mind was, you wouldn't say, think, or feel something you didn't want to be true.